A millionaire marries an older woman as a dare. What she confessed on their honeymoon left him horrified. And before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this. Enjoy the story. The chandelier sparkled brilliantly, casting dancing prisms of light across the walls of the opulent penthouse. The air was thick with the scent of expensive whiskey and the faint aroma of cigars, though no one smoked anymore. It was just a habit of old money, and this crowd liked to mimic tradition when it suited them. A roaring fire in the marble hearth offset the chill of the night, and a group of sharply dressed men lounged around a polished oak table, their laughter echoing through the space. Adam Calloway sat at the head of the table, a glass of Macallan in hand, his signature smirk firmly in place. At only 32, Adam was the kind of man people noticed immediately. His tailored suit fit him perfectly. His watch, a vintage Patek Philippe, gleamed under the warm glow of the overhead lights, and his piercing blue eyes seemed to appraise everyone in the room as though they were on trial. Confidence rolled off him in waves, the kind of confidence that came from years of success, charm, and being the smartest man in the room. "You think you're untouchable, don't you, Adams?" Darren's voice cut through the air, a sly grin curling on his lips. Darren, always the instigator, had been Adam's closest friend and sharpest competitor since college. His dark eyes gleamed with mischief, and his whiskey glass was nearly empty. "Not untouchable," Adam replied smoothly, leaning back in his chair, just undefeated. The room erupted in laughter, the kind of laughter that carried an edge of envy. Adam reveled in it. He lived for moments like this, when he could remind everyone in the room that no one played the game better than him. Darren leaned forward, his grin widening. "All right, Mr. Undefeated. Let's see how far that charm of yours can go this time." He pulled a glossy photo from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table toward Adam. The room went quiet. Even the clinking of ice against glass stilled as all eyes turned to the photograph. Adam picked it up, his curiosity piqued. The woman in the picture was striking in an unconventional way. She wasn't the kind of woman Adam typically pursued, no leggy blondes in designer dresses here. She was older, likely in her late 40s or early 50s, with streaks of silver running through her dark hair. Her features were sharp but elegant, her eyes intelligent and piercing, as though she could see right through the camera. There was an air of sophistication about her, understated but undeniable. "Who is she?" Adam asked, raising an eyebrow. "Evelyn Harper," Darren replied, leaning back in his chair with a triumphant smirk. "She's an art curator, runs her own gallery, smart, independent, and from what I hear, not exactly interested in men like you." Adam tilted his head, intrigued. "Men like me, you know," Darren said, his grin widening. "The rich, cocky kind who think charm can get them anything they want." The table erupted in laughter again, but this time, it was different. This time, the laughter felt like a challenge. Adam set the photo down and reached for his drink. "And what's your point?" "My point," Darren said, leaning forward, "is that you couldn't win her over if you tried." Adam chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You're saying there's a woman out there who's immune to my charm? I find that hard to believe." Darren's smirk turned into a full grin. "Then prove it." The room fell silent again. All eyes were on Adam now, waiting to see how he'd respond. Adam leaned back in his chair, his smirk widening. "What's the bet?" "1 year," Darren said. "You marry her, keep her happy, and convince her it's real. If you can do that, you win, and if I don't, you lose $1 million. Simple." The stakes weren't about money, not really. Adam could lose $1 million without batting an eye. This was about pride, about proving once again that Adam Calloway never backed down from a challenge. "You're on," Adam said, his voice calm and confident. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, but Adam barely noticed. His mind was already racing, imagining how he'd approach this new challenge. A week later, Adam found himself seated in a quiet, upscale cafe, the kind of place where the coffee was served in porcelain cups and the pastries looked more like art than food. He adjusted his cufflinks, glancing at his watch. He was 10 minutes early, as always. Being late was a sign of disrespect, and Adam never disrespected anyone he planned to win over. Evelyn Harper arrived precisely on time. The moment she walked through the door, Adam understood why Darren had chosen her. She carried herself with a kind of effortless grace, her movements precise and deliberate. She wore a tailor navy coat, her silver-streaked hair pulled back into a low bun. There was no flashiness, no need to draw attention to herself. Her presence alone commanded it. "Mr. Calloway," she said as she approached the table, her voice smooth and steady. Adam stood, offering his hand. "Please, call me Adam. And you must be Evelyn." She shook his hand briefly before taking the seat across from him. "I have to admit," she said, her gaze meeting his directly, "I was surprised when Margot said you wanted to meet. You don't seem like the type who needs help finding a date." Adam chuckled, leaning back slightly. "And you don't seem like the type who needs convincing. Yet here we are." Evelyn's lips twitched into the faintest smile. Touché. The conversation flowed easily after that. Evelyn was sharp, witty, and refreshingly direct. She didn't fawn over Adam's wealth or charm, nor did she seem particularly impressed by his carefully curated confidence. Instead, she asked pointed questions, turning the focus back on him in a way that was both disarming and intriguing. By the time the meeting ended, Adam found himself more curious about Evelyn than he'd anticipated. She wasn't like the women he was used to. There was a depth to her, a complexity that made him want to know more. As he watched her walk away, her coat billowing slightly in the evening breeze, Adam allowed himself a small smile. This wasn't going to be as easy as he'd thought, and for the first time in years, Adam felt genuinely excited by the challenge ahead. The city skyline stretched out before him as Adam leaned against the balcony of his penthouse, a glass of wine in his hand. He wasn't usually the type to dwell on things. His life was a constant stream of motion, deals, and conquests. Yet here he was, replaying every detail of his meeting with Evelyn Harper. She was different, no doubt about it. The way she looked at him, as if she could see past all the surface-level charm, unsettled him in a way he didn't expect. For the first time in years, Adam felt like he had something to prove, not to Darren, but to himself. The next step was critical. If he wanted Evelyn to fall for him, he'd have to play the long game. No grandiose displays of wealth or obvious moves. Evelyn wasn't the type to be impressed by expensive gifts or extravagant gestures. She valued sincerity, intelligence, and subtlety, all things Adam was capable of, though rarely called upon to use. 2 nights later, Adam stood outside Evelyn's brownstone, a bottle of wine in hand. He'd orchestrated the evening carefully. The invitation had been casual but thoughtful. He'd suggested they skip the formality of restaurants and spend the evening talking over a home-cooked meal. Evelyn had hesitated but eventually agreed, though he suspected curiosity played a bigger role than any interest in his cooking abilities. When Evelyn opened the door, she was dressed in a simple yet elegant navy dress, her hair loosely tied back. Her home reflected her personality perfectly, tasteful, warm, and understated. The walls were lined with bookshelves and small pieces of art, each one curated with care. "You're punctual," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I wouldn't dream of being late," Adam replied, stepping inside. "Especially not for a dinner I promised to cook." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "Should I be concerned?" "Not all," Adam said with a grin. "I've been known to make a mean pasta." She chuckled softly, leading him into the kitchen. As Adam unpacked the groceries he'd brought, Evelyn leaned against the counter, watching him with curiosity. "So, Adam," she said, "I'm trying to figure you out." Adam glanced up, his hands busy chopping garlic. "Is that so? And what have you figured out so far? You're not what I expected, she admitted. You have this reputation. Charming, successful, always in control. But there's something else. Something you're not showing. Adam paused for a fraction of a second before continuing. And what makes you think that? Evelyn smiled faintly. Let's just say I have a knack for reading people. Comes with the job. Well, Adam said, flashing a grin, maybe I'm just full of surprises. Evelyn didn't reply, but the look in her eyes told Adam she wasn't convinced. The dinner itself was simple but delicious, and Adam made sure the conversation flowed as effortlessly as the wine. He asked Evelyn about her work, her favorite artists, and the stories behind the pieces in her gallery. She spoke with passion, her voice lighting up as she described the thrill of discovering a new talent or curating an exhibit that touched people in unexpected ways. You know, Evelyn said, swirling her wine glass, art isn't just about beauty. It's about connection. It's about seeing the world through someone else's eyes, even if just for a moment. Adam nodded thoughtfully. I've never thought about it that way. To be honest, I've always seen art as decoration. Evelyn chuckled, shaking her head. That doesn't surprise me. Most people think that way, but it's so much more. It's history, emotion, struggle. It's a language that doesn't need words. Adam watched her as she spoke, her hands gesturing subtly, her eyes alight with conviction. He found himself captivated, not just by her words, but by the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence that set her apart from anyone he'd ever met. By the time dessert rolled around, gelato he'd picked up from a nearby Italian market, Adam felt the evening had gone exactly as planned. Evelyn seemed relaxed, her guard lowered just enough for him to glimpse the woman behind the careful facade. As they sat on her small balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Evelyn turned to him, her expression thoughtful. I have to admit, she said, I didn't expect to enjoy tonight as much as I did. Why not? Adam asked, leaning back in his chair. Evelyn hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the skyline. Because people like you, men like you, don't usually look twice at women like me. Adam frowned, genuinely surprised. What do you mean? I mean, she said, her tone measured, I'm not young, Adam. I'm not the kind of woman who turns heads at parties or commands attention in a room. And I'm okay with that. But you're the kind of man who could have anyone. So I can't help but wonder, why me? Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Adam didn't know how to respond. He could feel the weight of her question, the honesty behind it. The truth, the real truth, was something he couldn't say. Not yet. Instead, he leaned forward, his gaze steady. Because you're not like anyone I've ever met, he said softly. And that's what makes you unforgettable. Evelyn held his gaze for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she smiled. A small, genuine smile that sent a strange sense of relief washing over Adam. Unforgettable, huh? She said, her tone light, but her eyes warm. That's quite a compliment. It's not a compliment, Adam replied. It's a fact. When Adam left that night, he felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite untangle. Evelyn had opened up more than he'd expected, but she was still a mystery, still guarded in ways that made him want to know more. As he walked to his car, he realized something that unsettled him deeply. This wasn't just about the bet anymore. Evelyn Harper had become more than just a challenge. She was someone who mattered, someone who made him question the man he thought he was. And for the first time in years, Adam felt the faint stirrings of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Doubt. The afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the jeweler's boutique, casting a warm glow over the velvet displays of diamonds, emeralds, and sapphires. Adam stood at the counter, his gaze fixed on a single ring. It wasn't the flashiest or largest piece in the store. In fact, it was far more understated than anything he'd ever chosen before. A single, round diamond rested in an elegant platinum setting. Simple, timeless, perfect for Evelyn. An excellent choice, Mr. Calloway, the jeweler said, his practiced smile never wavering. A woman of elegance will appreciate its subtlety. Adam nodded but didn't respond immediately. His fingers hovered over the velvet box before he finally snapped it shut. "I'll take it," he said, his voice steady. The jeweler began wrapping the ring in his signature packaging, the task carried out with an air of ceremony. Adam watched in silence, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't supposed to feel like this. It was supposed to be another move in the game, another calculated step toward winning the bet. But as the jeweler handed him the box, Adam felt something he hadn't anticipated: doubt. He left the boutique and stepped into the bustling city street. The noise of traffic and pedestrians a sharp contrast to the quiet luxury of the store. He slipped the ring into his jacket pocket, his mind racing. For the first time in years, Adam Calloway wasn't sure if he was in control of the situation or himself. The proposal itself was meticulously planned, as was everything Adam did. He rented out an exclusive rooftop garden overlooking the city, its trellises wrapped in fairy lights and blooming flowers. A string quartet played softly in the background, their music blending seamlessly with the faint hum of the city below. The table was set for two, complete with fine china, crystal glasses, and candles flickering in the warm evening breeze. Adam stood near the edge of the rooftop, his gaze fixed on the skyline. His usual confidence was faltering. He had practiced the words he wanted to say, rehearsed every detail of the evening in his mind. But now, standing there, he felt the enormity of what he was about to do. When Evelyn arrived, she was breathtaking. Her dark green dress complemented the silver streaks in her hair, and the way she carried herself, graceful, self-assured, made Adam's heart race in a way that felt unfamiliar. "Adam," she said, stepping onto the rooftop. Her eyes swept over the scene before settling on him. "You've really outdone yourself." He smiled, extending a hand to her. "Only the best for you." Evelyn chuckled softly as she took his hand. "You do realize I'm more comfortable in a gallery than in places like this, don't you?" "I do," Adam replied, "but I wanted tonight to be special." They sat down to dinner, and as the courses were served, Adam did his best to keep the conversation light. Evelyn, as always, was sharp and insightful, but there was something different about her tonight. She seemed more relaxed, her usual guarded demeanor softened by the romantic atmosphere. As dessert was cleared away, Adam stood, his heart pounding. "Evelyn," he began, reaching into his pocket, "there's something I want to say." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, her expression curious. "Oh." Adam took a deep breath, pulling out the velvet box. "I know this might seem sudden, but from the moment I met you, you've challenged me in ways no one else ever has. You've shown me a different way of seeing the world, a different way of being, and I don't want to let that go." He dropped to one knee, holding up the ring. "Will you marry me?" For a moment, Evelyn didn't respond. Her eyes widened slightly, and Adam saw the faintest flicker of surprise on her face. She placed a hand over her mouth, her gaze shifting between him and the ring. "Adam," she said softly, "are you sure this is what you want?" "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes searching his face for something: reassurance, truth, maybe both. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said, a small smile breaking through her otherwise calm expression. The quartet began playing a soft melody as Adam slid the ring onto her finger. The guests, hidden until now, emerged to applaud, their cheers echoing across the rooftop. But as Evelyn leaned in to kiss him, Adam couldn't help but notice the faint distance in her smile, the way it didn't quite reach her eyes. Later that night, the two of them stood at the edge of the rooftop, gazing out at the glittering city below. Evelyn leaned against the railing, the diamond on her finger catching the light. "You never answer my question," she said, her voice quiet. "What question?" Adam asked, though he already knew. "Why me?" she said, turning to face him. "You could have anyone, Adam. So why did you choose me?" He hesitated, his mind scrambling for the right words. "Because you're different," he said finally. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." Evelyn held his gaze for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I hope that's true," she said softly, "because I've been through too much to play games." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He wanted to tell her the truth, to lay everything out in the open, but the fear of losing her, of destroying what little trust she had given him, kept him silent. "I won't let you down," he said instead, his voice filled with a conviction he wasn't sure he deserved. Evelyn nodded, but her silence spoke volumes. In the weeks that followed, Adam and Evelyn's engagement became the talk of their circles. Friends and acquaintances congratulated them. The news splashed across society pages and whispered about at exclusive events. But beneath the surface, Adam felt the weight of his deception growing heavier by the day. Every time Evelyn looked at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes, he wondered if she could see through him. If she knew that the man she had agreed to marry wasn't the man he claimed to be. And as the days turned into weeks, Adam realized that the question wasn't whether Evelyn would discover the truth. It was whether he had the courage to tell her before she did. The penthouse felt emptier than usual, though Evelyn's presence was everywhere. Her neatly folded scarf draped over the back of a chair, her favorite book resting on the coffee table, the faint scent of her jasmine perfume lingering in the air. Adam stood by the expansive windows, staring out at the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The view was the same as always, but tonight, it felt different. Everything felt different. It had been weeks since Evelyn had said yes to his proposal. Weeks filled with dinners, events, and the subtle buzz of their engagement spreading through their social circles. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. But beneath the polished exterior, Adam could feel the cracks beginning to form. Evelyn had always been guarded, but lately, there was a distance between them that hadn't been there before. She spent more time at the gallery, throwing herself into work, and their conversations had become polite and measured, lacking the spark that had drawn him to her in the first place. He took a sip of his whiskey, the burn doing little to ease the knot in his chest. He didn't want to admit it, even to himself, but he knew the truth. Evelyn was slipping away from him, and it was his fault. That evening, Evelyn arrived home late, her heels clicking softly against the marble floors as she entered the penthouse. She looked exhausted, but still carried herself with the same quiet elegance that always left Adam in awe. "You're late," he said, his voice calm, but edged with something he couldn't quite name. "I told you I had a meeting with a new artist," Evelyn replied, slipping off her coat and draping it over a chair. She glanced at him briefly before moving toward the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. Adam followed her, leaning against the counter as she drank. "You've been spending a lot of time at the gallery lately." Evelyn set the glass down and looked at him, her expression neutral. "That's my job, Adam." "I know," he said, his tone softening. "But it feels like you're avoiding me." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly, her calm demeanor shifting into something more guarded. "Avoiding you? Where's this coming from?" Adam hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I just feel like there's this wall between us. Like you're keeping me at arm's length." Evelyn crossed her arms, leaning back against the counter. "Adam, I'm not keeping you at arm's length. I'm just busy. The gallery is demanding, and there's a lot I need to focus on right now. But we're supposed to be building a life together," Adam said, his voice tinged with frustration. "How can we do that if you won't let me in?" Evelyn sighed, rubbing her temples. "Adam, you need to understand something about me. I've spent most of my life relying on myself. I've learned the hard way that letting people in doesn't always end well." Her words hit him like a blow. He wanted to tell her she could trust him, that he wasn't like the others who had let her down. But the weight of his secret pressed heavily on his chest, silencing him. "I'm not them," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not here to hurt you." Evelyn's gaze softened slightly, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stepped away, heading toward a living room. "I'm tired, Adam. Can we talk about this another time?" Adam watched her retreat, the knot in his chest tightening. He knew she needed space, but the distance between them felt insurmountable. The next morning, Adam decided to take matters into his own hands. He showed up at Evelyn's gallery unannounced, determined to bridge the gap that had formed between them. The gallery was quiet, the soft hum of classical music filling the space. Evelyn was in the back, speaking with a young artist about an upcoming exhibit. She didn't notice Adam at first, her attention fully on the conversation. He watched her from a distance, admiring the way she carried herself, the way she listened intently, her expression thoughtful, her hands gesturing subtly as she spoke. When she finally noticed him, her eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Adam," she said, walking over to him. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you," he said simply. Evelyn gave him a skeptical look. "At 9 in the morning, don't you have meetings to attend?" Adam shrugged. "They can wait." Evelyn sighed, glancing over her shoulder at the artist she'd been speaking with. "I'm in the middle of something, Adam." "I know," he said. "But can we talk? Just for a few minutes." Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Let's step into my office." Once inside her office, Evelyn closed the door and leaned against her desk, crossing her arms. "All right, Adam. What's so important that it couldn't wait?" Adam hesitated, his confidence wavering under her steady gaze. I feel like we're drifting apart, Evelyn. And I don't want that to happen." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Drifting apart? Adam, we've been engaged for less than a month. Don't you think you're being a bit dramatic?" "Maybe," he admitted. "But I don't want to wake up one day and realize we let something slip through the cracks. I care about you, Evelyn. More than I've cared about anyone in a long time." Her expression softened slightly, but her guard remained up. "Adam, you don't need to worry about me. I'm fine. I've been fine on my own for years." "That's the problem," Adam said, stepping closer. "You're so used to being fine on your own that you don't know how to let someone else in. And I get it. I do. But I'm here, Evelyn. I'm not going anywhere." Evelyn looked away, her gaze distant. "It's not that simple, Adam. Trust doesn't come easily for me. It's something I have to protect." "I'm not asking you to hand it over all at once," Adam said softly. "But give me a chance to earn it." For a moment, Evelyn didn't respond. Then she let out a small sigh and nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "But you'll have to be patient with me, Adam. This isn't something I can rush." Adam smiled, relief washing over him. "I'll wait as long as it takes." That night, Adam lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling as Evelyn slept beside him. Her words replayed in his mind, a mix of hope and caution. She was willing to try, but he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. And as he stared into the darkness, Adam felt the weight of his secret pressing down on him once again. If Evelyn ever found out the truth, everything they were trying to build would crumble. He turned to look at her, her face serene in the dim light. "I won't lose you," he whispered to himself. "I can't." But deep down, he knew the only way to keep her was to come clean. The question was whether he had the courage to do it before it was too late. The gallery hummed softly with the murmur of voices and the clink of wine glasses. Evelyn's latest exhibition was nothing short of a masterpiece. Paintings, sculptures, and installations carefully curated to tell a story of resilience and beauty. The space was alive with movement, yet serene in its purpose, a reflection of Evelyn herself. Adam arrived fashionably late, as always, dressed in a tailored navy suit that exuded effortless confidence. But tonight, his usual bravado was tempered by something deeper. He hadn't seen much of Evelyn over the past week, her time consumed by preparations for the exhibit. He'd hoped this evening would give them a chance to reconnect, to bridge the widening gap he couldn't ignore. He spotted her near the centerpiece of the exhibit, speaking with a guest. She looked radiant in a flowing black gown, her silver-streaked hair pulled back elegantly. Evelyn's presence commanded the room, not with loud declarations, but with the quiet assurance of someone who knew exactly who she was. As Adam approached, she caught sight of him, her smile polite but reserved. "Adam," she said, her voice warm yet measured. "You made it." "Of course," he replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Her smile remained polite, but Adam sensed the distance between them. He glanced around the room, his gaze landing on a large canvas positioned under a spotlight. It was a painting of a young girl standing on a beach, her face turned toward the horizon. The colors were muted but powerful, the brushstrokes conveying both innocence and melancholy. "Who's the artist?" Adam asked, gesturing toward the painting. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the canvas, her expression softening. "It's one of mine," she said quietly. Adam raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I didn't know you painted." "It's not something I do often," Evelyn replied, her voice distant. "This one is personal." Adam studied the painting again, his curiosity growing. "Who's the girl?" Evelyn hesitated, her fingers lightly brushing the stem of her wine glass. "Her name was Grace," she said finally. "She was my daughter." Adam's breath caught. He turned to face Evelyn, his chest tightening at the weight of her words. "Was?" he asked gently. "She passed away when she was 7, Evelyn said, her voice steady but tinged with a sorrow that time had softened but not erased. "It was a long time ago." "I'm so sorry," Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn gave him a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "But you don't need to say anything. It's part of who I am now, a part I've learned to carry." Adam wanted to say more, to ask questions, but he sensed that Evelyn wasn't ready to delve deeper. Instead, he nodded, letting the silence between them speak volumes. Later that evening, Adam found himself wandering the gallery alone. The guests had begun to leave, the once bustling space now quiet. He stopped in front of the painting of Grace, his eyes tracing the lines of the girl's face, the way her features mirrored Evelyn's. "She loved the ocean," Evelyn's voice came from behind him. Adam turned to see her standing a few feet away, her arms crossed loosely. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on the painting. "She said it made her feel free," Evelyn continued. "Like she could be anything, do anything." Adam remained silent, sensing that this was a rare moment of vulnerability. "She was so full of life," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly. "Even when she got sick, she never stopped smiling. She never stopped believing that things would get better." "What happened?" Adam asked gently. "Leukemia," Evelyn said, her tone matter-of-fact. "It came on so fast. One day she was running on the beach, and the next, she was in a hospital bed. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough." Adam reached for her hand, his chest aching at the pain in her voice. "Evelyn." She shook her head, blinking back tears. "It's okay," she said. "It was a long time ago, but losing her, it changed me. It made me realize how fragile everything is, how quickly it can all be taken away." Adam tightened his grip on her hand. "Thank you for telling me," he said softly. Evelyn turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't talk about her often," she admitted, "but tonight it felt right." Adam nodded, his heart heavy with guilt. Evelyn had opened up to him, shared one of the most painful parts of her life. And all the while, he was still hiding the truth about why he married her. The drive home was quiet, Evelyn staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. Adam's mind raced, his guilt gnawing at him like a relentless tide. He wanted to tell her everything, to lay bare the truth, and hope she could forgive him. But every time he opened his mouth, the words caught in his throat. When they arrived at the penthouse, Evelyn gave him a faint smile. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "It meant a lot to me." "I wouldn't have missed it," Adam replied. Evelyn hesitated, then leaned in to kiss his cheek. "Good night, Adam." "Good night," he said, watching as she walked down the hall to her room. As the door closed behind her, Adam sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. He had never felt more torn in his life. Evelyn deserved the truth, but the thought of losing her was unbearable. He glanced at the painting of Grace that now hung on the wall, the girl's face a haunting reminder of the fragility of the trust Evelyn had begun to place in him. "I'll tell her," Adam whispered to himself. "I'll tell her everything. Just not tonight." The rain outside had turned into a relentless downpour, the kind that blurred the city skyline into a smear of twinkling lights. Adam sat in the darkened living room of the penthouse, the faint glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. A glass of untouched whiskey sat on the table beside him, the ice slowly melting. The room was silent, save for the steady rhythm of the rain against the windows. Evelyn had gone to bed hours ago, and yet Adam hadn't been able to bring himself to sleep. Her revelation about Grace had left him reeling, a knot of guilt tightening in his chest. For weeks, he had tried to ignore the growing weight of his secret, convincing himself that he could keep it buried. But now, after everything Evelyn had shared with him, the thought of her discovering the truth on her own was unbearable. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the silence. The screen lit up with Darren's name. Adam hesitated for a moment before picking it up. "Well," Darren's voice came through, his tone laced with amusement. "How's married life treating you? Have you won the bet yet?" Adam clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the phone. "This isn't a game anymore, Darren," he said, his voice low. "Not a game." Darren chuckled. "Don't tell me you're getting sentimental, Adam. We both know you took this on for the challenge. You wanted to prove you could get anyone to fall for you, even someone like her." "Someone like her?" Adam repeated, his tone sharp. "You know what I mean," Darren replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "She's older, cautious, not exactly the kind of woman who throws herself at a guy like you. That was the whole point, remember? To see if you could crack her armor." Adam felt his chest tighten, the anger rising in him like a wave. "You don't know her," he said through gritted teeth. "You don't know anything about her." "And you do." Darren shot back. "Face it, Adam. You're playing house because it's easier than admitting you're bored out of your mind. You're not in love with her. You're in love with the idea of proving me wrong." "I'm not that guy anymore," Adam said firmly. "Oh, really?" Darren replied, his voice mocking. "Then why haven't you told her the truth? If you're so reformed, why are you still lying to her?" Adam ended the call without another word, his heart pounding. Darren's words echoed in his mind, twisting the knife that was already lodged deep in his chest. The next morning, Adam woke to the sound of Evelyn moving around in the kitchen. He rubbed his temples, the weight of the previous night still pressing down on him. He made his way to the kitchen, where Evelyn stood by the counter, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Morning," she said, glancing at him briefly before returning her attention to the steaming mug in her hands. "Morning," Adam replied, his voice hoarse. Evelyn's gaze lingered on him for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. "Are you all right? You look tired." "I didn't sleep well," he admitted. She nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "You've been restless lately," she said, her tone calm but probing. Adam hesitated, the urge to confess bubbling up inside him. "There's been a lot on my mind," he said finally. Evelyn set her mug down and crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "Like what?" Adam opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the trust she had begun to place in him. If he told her now, would it shatter everything they'd built? "Work," he said instead, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. Just work. Evelyn studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. All right, she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. That evening, Adam found himself pacing the living room, his thoughts racing. He knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. The lies were eating away at him, and Evelyn deserved better than half-truths and excuses. When Evelyn walked into the room, Adam stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her tone cautious. Adam took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice strained. Evelyn's brow furrowed, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "What is it?" Adam hesitated, his mind screaming at him to stop, to find a way out. But he couldn't. "Not anymore. When I met you," he began, his voice shaking. "It wasn't by chance. Darren, my friend, he made a bet. He said I couldn't win you over, that I couldn't make you fall for me. And I took it." Evelyn's eyes widened, her face paling as the words sank in. "What?" she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's why I approached you," Adam continued, his voice thick with guilt. "That's why I married you. It started as a bet. But, Evelyn, it's not like that anymore. It stopped being a game a long time ago. Evelyn held up a hand, silencing him. Her expression was unreadable, but Adam could see the hurt in her eyes. "So it was all a lie?" she asked, her voice trembling. "No," Adam said quickly, stepping closer to her. "It started that way, but it's real now. Evelyn, I swear to you, it's real." She took a step back, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? How betrayed I feel?" "I do," Adam said, his voice breaking. "And I hate myself for it. But I love you, Evelyn. I love you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you let me." Evelyn stared at him, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. "I trusted you," she said softly, "and you made a fool out of me." Adam reached for her hand, but she pulled away, shaking her head. "I can't do this right now, Adam," she said, her voice cracking. I need time." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Adam standing there, his chest aching with the weight of everything he had just lost. The rain had turned into a slow drizzle, casting a somber mood over the city. Adam sat alone in his office, the room dimly lit by a single desk lamp. He stared at the framed photo of Evelyn he had placed on the edge of his desk, a candid shot from one of their evenings out, her laughter frozen in time. That was before the truth had spilled out, before the quiet devastation in her eyes when she walked away from him 2 nights ago. His phone buzzed, and for a moment, he thought it might be her. But when he glanced at the screen, Darren's name lit up. Adam's jaw tightened as he picked up the phone. "Well," Darren's voice was smug, laced with condescension. "I hear you finally told her. How'd that go?" Adam's grip on the phone tightened. "What do you want, Darren?" "To check in on my investment," Darren replied smoothly. "We both know how this ends, Adam. She walks away, and you come crawling back to the life you were good at. Money, power, and no strings attached. This whole thing was a fantasy. You don't know anything about her," Adam snapped. "Or about me." Darren chuckled. "I know plenty, Adam. I know you thought you could have it all, that you could win the bet, and somehow make her fall for you for real. But guess what? You can't build something real on a lie." "Goodbye, Darren," Adam said coldly, ending the call and tossing the phone onto his desk. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as Darren's words echoed in his mind. The truth was, Darren wasn't entirely wrong. He couldn't build something real on a lie. But maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild. Later that evening, Adam found himself standing outside Evelyn's gallery. The lights inside were still on, illuminating the vibrant canvases displayed in the windows. He hesitated before stepping inside, unsure if she would even want to see him. The gallery was quiet, save for the soft strains of classical music playing in the background. Evelyn was standing near the back, her back to him, gazing at a new piece. Adam's heart ached at the sight of her, poised, graceful, yet so far away. "Evelyn," he said softly. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Adam," she said, her tone calm but distant. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said, stepping closer. Evelyn crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "Why?" "So you can say sorry again. So you can try to explain why you lied to me." Adam stopped a few feet away, his hands at his sides. "Yes," he said simply, "because I need you to know that I regret everything about how this started. But I don't regret meeting you. I don't regret falling in love with you." Evelyn's eyes flickered, a brief flash of emotion breaking through her composure. "Falling in love," she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Adam, you don't even know what love is. Love isn't about games or bets. It's about trust, and you destroyed that the moment you lied to me." "I know," Adam said, his voice heavy with guilt, "and I'll never forgive myself for it. But Evelyn, you have to believe me. Everything after that first meeting was real. The way I feel about you, the way you've changed me, that's real." Evelyn shook her head, looking away. "You don't get to decide what's real for me, Adam. You don't get to rewrite the story just because you feel bad now." Adam took a step closer, his voice earnest. "I'm not trying to rewrite anything. I'm just trying to make things right. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life earning it if I have to." Evelyn let out a bitter laugh, her arms dropping to her sides. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just lie to me. You made me doubt myself. You made me question every moment we spent together, every word you said. How am I supposed to believe anything now?" Adam's chest tightened, the weight of her words nearly crushing him. "I don't have an answer for that," he admitted. "I don't know how to fix this. But I do know that walking away from you isn't an option for me. I love you, Evelyn, and I'll fight for you, even if you never want to see me again." Evelyn turned to face him fully, her expression softening just enough to let him see the pain beneath her anger. "You don't get to fight for me on your terms, Adam," she said quietly. "If you really love me, you'll give me the space I need to figure out what I want." Adam nodded slowly, his heart sinking. "I'll do whatever you need," he said, "even if it means letting you go." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said softly. The days that followed were some of the longest of Adam's life. Evelyn had asked for space, and he gave it to her, though it nearly killed him to stay away. He threw himself into work, but every meeting, every email felt hollow. His mind was consumed with thoughts of Evelyn, her smile, her laughter, the way she lit up when she talked about Grace. He spent hours replaying their last conversation, trying to find hope in her words. She hadn't said it was over, but she hadn't said it wasn't either. It was a limbo Adam had never experienced before, and it left him feeling helpless in a way he wasn't used to. One evening, Adam found himself standing on the rooftop where he'd proposed to Evelyn. The fairy lights were gone, and the space was empty, save for the faint hum of the city below. He stared out at the skyline, his chest heavy with regret. "You made a mess of this," he muttered to himself. But even as the guilt threatened to overwhelm him, Adam felt a flicker of resolve. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight for the future. If Evelyn ever let him back in, he would spend the rest of his life proving he was worth it. The months that followed felt like a test of patience and perseverance for Adam. He had given Evelyn the space she asked for, respecting her need to heal and process, though every fiber of his being wanted to reach out to her, to explain himself one more time. But he knew that pushing her would only drive her further away. So, he waited. He waited in silence, in doubt, and in regret, his days consumed with thoughts of her. He threw himself into work, but even his usual focus and ambition felt hollow. For the first time in his life, success and money didn't seem to matter. The only thing he wanted, the only person he wanted, was Evelyn. One evening, Adam was at his penthouse, staring blankly at the skyline, when his phone buzzed. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Evelyn's name on the screen. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what her message might say. Finally, he opened it. It was simple, just a request. "Can we meet tomorrow?" The gallery at 7 p.m. Adam stared at the message, his heart racing. Was this the beginning of reconciliation? Or was she finally going to end things for good? He couldn't tell, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. He replied with a single word, "Of course." The next evening, Adam arrived at the gallery early. The space was quiet, its usual warmth amplified by the soft glow of the lights. He stood near the entrance, his hands in his pockets, feeling more nervous than he had in years. Evelyn appeared moments later, walking toward him with the same grace and composure that had captivated him from the start. She wore a simple black dress, her silver-streaked hair framing her face. But there was something different about her tonight. A calmness, perhaps, or maybe a sense of resolve. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Thank you for asking," Adam replied, his voice steady but cautious. Evelyn gestured for him to follow her, leading him toward the back of the gallery. They stopped in front of a new painting, one Adam hadn't seen before. It was a stunning piece, a swirl of vibrant colors that seemed to dance across the canvas, yet beneath the surface was a hint of darkness. It was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. "It's beautiful," Adam said after a long moment. "Did you paint this?" Evelyn nodded. "It's about grace," she said quietly, "and about forgiveness." Adam turned to face her, his chest tightening. "Evelyn, Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I've spent weeks thinking about us, Adam, about what we were, what we are, and what we could be. And I realized something. Holding on to anger, to betrayal, it's exhausting. It doesn't change the past, and it doesn't help me move forward." Adam stayed silent, sensing that this was her moment, her chance to say what she needed to say. "I can't pretend that what you did didn't hurt me," Evelyn continued, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "And I won't lie to you. It's going to take time for me to fully trust you again. But I've seen how hard you've tried, how much you've changed. And I believe that the man standing in front of me isn't the same man who made that bet." Adam's heart pounded in his chest. "Evelyn, I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you're right." Evelyn smiled faintly, a mix of sadness and hope in her expression. "I don't need grand gestures or promises, Adam. I just need honesty. If we're going to move forward, everything has to be real. No lies. No games. Always," Adam said, his voice firm. "From this moment on, I swear to you, everything will be real." Evelyn studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right," she said softly. "Then let's take this one step at a time." The weeks that followed were a tentative rebuilding of what had been broken. Evelyn was cautious, but willing to let Adam back into her life, piece by piece. They spent more time together, not at lavish events or extravagant dinners, but in quiet, simple moments. Walks in the park, evenings at the gallery, or just talking over coffee. Adam found himself falling even more deeply in love with her. He admired her strength, her resilience, and the way she carried herself with grace despite everything she'd been through. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to truly care for someone, not as a conquest or a challenge, but as a partner. One evening, Evelyn invited Adam to her home for dinner. It was a modest affair, far from the extravagant meals he was used to, but felt more meaningful than anything he'd ever experienced. Afterward, she led him to her small study, where she showed him a collection of Grace's paintings. "She was so talented," Evelyn said, her voice filled with pride and sorrow. "I see so much of her in these." Adam studied the paintings, his chest tightening. "She would have grown up to be incredible," he said softly. "She already was," Evelyn replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Adam reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Thank you for sharing this with me." Evelyn looked at him, her expression softening. "I realized that if we're going to move forward, I can't keep holding parts of myself back. Grace will always be a part of me, and if you're going to be in my life, you need to know all of me." Adam nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. "And I want to know all of you, Evelyn. Every part." Months passed, and their relationship deepened. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and hesitation, but it was real. They had built something new from the ashes of what had been broken, and for the first time, Adam felt truly at peace. On the anniversary of their engagement, Adam took Evelyn back to the rooftop where he had proposed. This time, there were no fairy lights or string quartets, just the two of them, standing beneath the stars. "I brought you here because I wanted to do this right," Adam said, taking her hands in his. "Evelyn Harper, you've taught me more about love, forgiveness, and strength than I ever thought possible. I don't deserve you, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to—" Evelyn smiled, her eyes glistening. "You're not the man I said yes to that night," she said softly. "You're better." Adam slipped a simple band onto her finger, his heart full. "Here's to the future," he said. Evelyn leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "Here's to us." As they stood together under the stars, Adam knew that their story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And for the first time, he truly believed in happily ever after. And now, I want to hear from you. Which part of this story touched your heart the most? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. And of course, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more narratives like this. Each subscription helps us continue bringing exciting stories to you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.